So one obvious starting point with thinking about resilience is that you talk about dependency and or a dependency on a single resource or industry or situation. It seems like kind of common sense that to be dependent on one thing is fragile, because if one thing can change, then the whole thing changes. Yet, I wonder if this is not just a little bit surface level thinking resilience, because it just seems kind of too self-evident that yes, better have 4 or 5 things in your basket than all the eggs in the same basket, kind of a thing. So beyond diversification, is there some characteristics of communities that are resilient versus communities that are not resilient that we can identify or speculate about or look into?
Yeah.
What makes a community resilient beyond just diversity?
Yes, so diversification is one aspect, and in total I identified 12 variables or parameters that in a way influence the resilience of a place or the non-resilience of a place. Place attachment would be one thing, which is a very emotional parameter, and I deliberately decided after I did all this statistical analysis to go into more qualitative analysis, so talking to the people and come up with parameters that you cannot really measure with statistics, which is very difficult. So something like the place attachment, assuming that people that feel attached to a place, that have a sense of belonging, that really care about their place, they will try everything to save this place. Might also sound self-evident, but I think it's still a very important parameter. Another one would be the infrastructure that is provided. Can be infrastructure to the industries. Of course, in most places we have quite a good infrastructure for fisheries, but other than that, do people have access to internet? Do people have internet to a well-working road system? Energy costs, water supply, all these kind of things are also quite important. Which other parameter can we talk about?
Well, I suppose, because as you know, I'm teaching now a course in innovation, and later we can talk about that better, but you and I are both involved in a project about innovation in remote and rural communities. So what sort of interests me is there somehow a way to grasp the capacity to innovate, or almost like communal creativity? Is there any cultural traits or social or even institutional traits of certain communities that might make them more resilient or more adaptable to change? Or is there anything in your research that would shed a light on that question?
Thanks for this hint. Adaptive capacity and coping strategy are definitely 2 parameters that are among these 12 that I just mentioned. Yes, and looking into the innovative capacity, innovative pathways is also very important, because what I observed is a little bit of a paradigmatic change in Icelandic policies, in Icelandic regional development as well, to say like we should focus on endogenous strategies in the smaller communities, like the Fragile Communities Project is about. And I think until not that long ago, maybe 2010, heavy industries, large-scale development plans were the thing to increase resilience, which of course you said might be self-evident that diversification is super important. Yes, it's absolutely self-evident, but still I wonder why we still come up with large-scale development plans that are focusing on single industry and do not diversify. So I think we have to repeat it over and over again, even though it might be self-evident. But the coping strategy and innovation, absolutely. The problem that I have with this, or what I assessed in some communities, is that there is too much expectations from people, too much expectation, and people might say, like, outside people, might say like, oh, this place is not resilient because they're not innovative. But I think what I also criticize here, and this is also where resilience doesn't necessarily offer a good response to, is what are we expecting? We talk about a place that has gone through austerity politics for 20, 30 years, that has lost the mainstay industry overnight, that had no time to adjust, no time to cope. We are expecting a lot from these communities. And after 20 years of out-migration, of very well-educated people, or then education-seeking people, 20 years later, people come and like, so what do you want? Could you please be innovative and come up with a new strategy? Where's your adaptive capacity? Where's your coping strategy?
Exactly.
So we are expecting a lot from small places that have done nothing else but fishing for basically most of the 21st century. 20th century.
Well, I've had some conversations with your colleagues within this prestigious institution here, and I really, as a proponent of innovation, it's sometimes been sort of directed at me, this critique, but I really share it, and I wonder if whether or not this comes from a shallow understanding of how innovation happens. Because we're used to thinking about innovation as an individual act of sort of the entrepreneur as a persona in the community that kind of comes up with brilliant ideas, but maybe less inclined to think about innovation from it being a product of an ecosystem and of long-term investments into that. So it doesn't come out of thin air also. So I think whether the cruelty of proposing innovation to communities that have lost a lot of capacity sometimes comes from this expectation that overnight you become innovative and you do new things.
Absolutely.
Whereas everywhere where you've had significant innovation happen, if you analyze these places, you can see that it traces it back to decades of proper investment into innovation and proper development.
Absolutely, I would totally agree. And I mean, I don't look that much into, is it an individual, is it an entire community that is trying to innovate out of problems, but absolutely. And when I mentioned a paradigmatic change that might occur in Iceland at the moment, I'm slightly optimistic that it could happen, is that there is at least comparatively more money put into innovation. But again, it's very problematic. It's not advisable to just say like, we take 100 million kroners, please apply for grants and we support your ideas. Nice first step, but again, it's communities where you probably do not have all this innovative capacity necessarily, and even though there might be people that have an idea, they probably need some help, even though I don't like this phrase, but there might be some assistance for how to apply for these grants, how to apply and go the next step from the idea to realization. And as you exactly said, like some things take time. So you should not say like fragile communities runs for 5 years and with this set amount of money, and within this 5 years you have to innovate somehow. This can work, but I doubt that there are really resilient or long-lasting effects from that. It's a really nice way, but probably just a bandage on a wound of out-migration, so to say. And this is my problem that I have also a little bit with this kind of buzzword of innovation, which is great, but innovation alone cannot solve problems that people have in these communities. And especially what I think as well is like, even though they might develop ideas in small communities, one has to see like, is that an idea that can be realized within this community? Or will it in the end also lead to people moving their ideas, their production, the next step to Reykjavik as well? Because it's like, this is where the markets are, this is where we have the milieu, the innovative milieu, because you might miss this in small coastal communities as well. So, I mean, I call it milieu, but you call it probably ecosystem, which I think is a very nice phrase as well for innovation. So an innovative ecosystem. I think this, if we want to stay with this ecosystem idea, needs more than just funds. It needs definitely time, it needs assistance, but not in a top-down manner, I would say. It's not like the specialist from the south should come and say, like, I know how innovation works and listen to me, and within 5 years this place will flourish. That won't work. It should be a good combination, I think, of bottom-up strategies, getting the most of the local ideas with outside expertise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a lot of things that I am teaching your students that touch upon this, and I would, like I said before, I think there are a lot of keys just to be found in understanding what innovation is. One of the slides I showed your students last week was a picture of the iPhone, with Steve Jobs as being the quintessential inventor of the iPhone. And there's a story that is told of Silicon Valley, which is this miracle of invention and innovation and technology, of how it's the secret sauce is sort of very creative people plus venture capital. So you got all these startup founders running around, and then you got venture capital investment, and then somehow, boom, innovation happens. But the other lens looks at how, for example, every single thing that made the iPhone innovative can be traced back to long-term research and development programs that were almost entirely publicly funded. So, Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley not because, so I guess that the thing is that in regional development strategies, you have this cliche of you want to make the Silicon Valley of the Westfjords, or the Silicon Valley of Middle East, or the Silicon Valley of Africa. But what they all do is they start to copy the myth of what it is, and not the actual origin story, which is a 40-year-long process of like basic investments, institutions, research and development, but also just product development, which was led by the state in many cases. So then if we take that understanding and we look at a village or a coastal community, and we say it needs to be more innovative or should be innovative, or that's what could solve things, and we understand innovation as a long-term social process and not as people getting great ideas and solving their own situation overnight. Then I think we are approaching a lot more sort of fair, a lot more viable understanding of innovation, in my opinion.
I would totally agree. Yes, I think that was not a question, right? I think it was.
No, I was just telling you how it is.
Exactly, I would totally agree.
Well, you're welcome to agree or disagree.
No, I think this. I can't add more.
I was allowed to say things, right?
Yes, I was. I